1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are we ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cameras are on. Okay. Lawyers say we have to do this, so here we go. First, some administrative and technical notes. Members are reminded they must be visible on screen within the software platform for the purposes of identification. Members must continue to use the software platform's video function while attending the hearing unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. If you experience technical difficulties, good luck. Please call. We'll try to do the best we can for you. When you recognize the video will be broadcast via television and internet feeds, you will be recognized as normal for questions, but if you want to speak at any other time, you must seek permission, which I will decide whether you'll get it or not. Please mute your microphone when you are not speaking, and remember to unmute prior to speaking. That can be said 1,000 times and still we forget to unmute. Please be aware that there is a slight lag between when you start speaking and when the camera shot switches to you. Please remember to keep the software platform's video function on for the entirety of the time you are attending this hearing. If you leave for a short period of time for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, please leave your video function on. If you are leaving to join a different proceeding, you're going to miss all of this and be very, very sorry. Or you will be absent for a significant period of time. You should exit the software platform entirely, then rejoin if you return. Please be advised that I have designated committee member staff next to me to mute unrecognized members' microphones if necessary, and if I decide I don't like what you hear, you will continue to be allowed to speak, or maybe we will unmute you or mute you. Please use the platform's chat feature to communicate with staff regarding, that was for you, Doug. Please use the platform's chat feature to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistical support issues. Finally, you'll see a 5-minute countdown clock on the software platform's display, but if necessary, I will remind you. Okay. Now, can we go on? Did everybody hear that? Do we need a test? Now, for those of you that missed the president at the Democratic caucus this morning, you need to know that we are in the midst of a very, very important national debate about infrastructure. Well, so is this committee. This committee is all about infrastructure. 1,100 DoD facilities all around the world are our responsibility. Among those facilities are the repair shops, the depots, the shipyards, the arsenals that keep the tanks rolling, the ships at sea, the aircraft in the air, and the munitions to wage war. The effectiveness and efficiency of these facilities are a critical piece of the United States military's ability to successfully meet our national security requirements. We've heard this over and over repeatedly from the Defense Department, from the generals, 1 star, 2, 3, 4 stars, and chiefs and secretaries. Really important. However, we've also heard that these are national treasures. They're the insurance policies for readiness. And yet, the supposed commitment to the depots is not translated into action. The organic industrial base infrastructure is chronically underfunded to the point that these facilities are relics of the past. The crumbling World War II era depots are outdated for today's missions, let alone the needs of the future force or the surge requirements for a major conflict. Indeed, some of the facilities that are currently being used are on the National Historic Registry. The problem is pervasive. The Government Accountability Office found that more than half of all DoD industrial-based facilities are in poor condition, including all 4 public shipyards. This has resulted in a decline in the depot performance since 2007 and significant delays returning weapon systems to the field for operations and training. Moreover, suboptimal facility configurations create an inefficient repair process, forcing maintainers to perform workarounds that further increase the maintenance time and cost. The equipment at these facilities is often in use more than a decade beyond its intended service life, creating safety hazards and further maintenance delays. Finally, many of the depots are at a high risk of damage from extreme weather and other environmental effects and have not been upgraded to use clean and efficient energy sources. For example, At the Marine Corps production plant in Albany, Georgia, a shortage of paint booths resulted in vehicles, actually victims too, remaining unpainted and stored outside. Oh, guess what? Now they get rusty. And so we get to go one more time through the process. So the cost goes up. At Corpus Christi, Texas, Army Depot, engines need to be moved across 5 miles of facilities during the repair process because the depot's highly inefficient workflow. Antiquated manufacturing processes have caused deadly explosions at Army's ammunition plants. Attack submarines have recently sat idle for years because of inadequate shipyard capacity, and public shipyards are in such abysmal condition that the Navy has estimated it will not be able to service the Ford-class aircraft carriers or complete 1/3 of its required maintenance availabilities between now and 2040. Shall I repeat that? We got a problem. The military has a problem. This committee perceives the problem, and we damn well intend to solve it. So get ready. In response to these conditions, the Congress has required the services to create detailed infrastructure optimizational plans in 2019 and layered on requirement in 2020 that the Office of the Secretary of Defense develop an overarching depot investment strategy. The service plans are mostly in their initial stages. And the Office of the Secretary of Defense report is, oh my goodness, a year late. What a shock. But not a surprise. The execution of these plans will take up to 25 years and cost billions of dollars. I've told all the witnesses today there is no such thing as a 25-year plan. That is a cheap way of saying you don't have a plan. So we're going to be talking specifically about what are you going to do in the next 5 years, and how does that fit into the future. So let's remember that over such long time horizons, the needed funding represents a fraction of the service's budgets. Even the most expensive, the Navy's Shipyard Infrastructure Optimizational Plan, or SIOPS, would cost approximately 0.5% of the Navy's current annual operating budget each year. The SIOP is also the most developed of the infrastructure optimizational plans, which does not speak well for the other departments. It is estimated that the Navy will need to spend about $25 billion over 20 years to recapitalize the public shipyards, $8 billion for dry dock investment, $14 billion for facility reconfiguration and optimization, and $3 billion for tooling and equipment. Yet, baffling, the Navy has recently stated that it cannot fund most of the proposed facility optimization and capital equipment upgrades in 2022 or over the next 5 years with anticipated resources. This situation is emblematic of the very problem that has gotten us into this point. The services claim that the depots are critical and the rehabilitation is of paramount importance. And yet, show me the money. The sustainment and modernizations are consistently deprioritized, and the situation is made worse. I imagine this challenge is related to the discussion in Congress about providing the department with additional top-line infrastructure money. Yet such a resource play and others like putting depot funding on the unfunded priority list sends the message that the facility and the equipment optimization is optional. In other words, not a first priority. When we keep hearing that it is essential, it cannot be both absolutely necessary and essential and then not prioritized on the funding programs. So, witnesses, you're going to be able to answer that question. So we need rigorous, detailed, well-resourced infrastructure optimizational plans and substantial leadership attention to their execution to guarantee success. But we also need more than a concerted rallying around a once-in-a-generation upgrade to the depots. I cannot imagine any private sector industry accepting a 20-year timeline to catch up to its competitors. But that is what the military is saying. Now, let's get on with it. So how do we avoid this? Well, this committee is going to pay attention. and we would expect each of the departments and the Office of the Secretary to pay attention. I'm not one to be quiet. There are times when I'm not one to be nice. And I'm kind of feeling to be in an ugly mood today. But I'm sure Doug is going to somehow calm me down and tell me that this is all going to pass and not to worry, 20 years from now we'll all be here. Doug, it's your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I share very many of your concerns. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today, for their testimony and their service. Our organic industrial base is a vital and important part of our force readiness and ultimately our national security. Over the past several years, this committee has emphasized the importance of modernizing our depots. Today marks the third hearing we have held this year that will touch on the lack of sufficient investments being made to the infrastructure, equipment, and processes of the organic industrial base. In 2019, the GAO assessed that most facilities at the military depots are in poor condition, and that the average age of equipment exceeded its useful life at more than 70% of the depots. There is a clear need, and yet the department and the services have failed in the past to prioritize investments. So here we are again asking how you intend to modernize and what resources it will require. In 2019, Congress directed the service secretaries to develop optimization and investment plans for the depots. Then in Section 359 of the fiscal year 2020 NDAA, Congress directed the Secretary of Defense to issue a comprehensive strategy for improving depot infrastructure. This strategy was due in October 2020, but has been delayed until October 2021, and as of today, it's the 26th of October, we don't have it. Mr. Marani, in response to GAO's 2019 recommendation that your office develop an approach for managing service depot investments, you stated your office could not develop such an approach until the plans were finalized. I'm interested to hear what you think your office's role is in this process if it's not to help shape these plans. The status of our organic infrastructure also impacts our ability to attract and retain the quality workforce that we need. If folks know they will be working in facilities that haven't been updated in 50 years, that will make it hard to compete against private industry. Admittedly, Congress isn't blameless here either. Every time we pass a continuing resolution, as we're in right now, it makes it easier for you all to ask us to reprogram money away from these accounts. Unfortunately, there aren't many easy answers here, but I know the chairman and I and the entire subcommittee are committed to working with you to ensure that our organic industrial base has what it needs to continue to support the mission and our men and women in uniform. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Lamborn, thank you. I'd like now to welcome and thank our witnesses, Steve Morani, Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment at the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Ms. Karen Saunders, Senior Official performing the duties of Acting Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, and I understand you have another job also. Frederick Stefani, Acting Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, and Ms. Darlene Costello, Acting Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. So your formal testimony will be in the record. Well, why don't we hear from each of you? If you'd like to make an opening statement, please do. We'll start. We'll let the Secretary's office begin the process. Mr. Morani.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Lamborn, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the steps the Department of Defense is taking to rejuvenate, modernize, and optimize the organic industrial base. Your continued support for this national resource safeguards the Department's ability to deliver ready and mission-capable weapon systems at the speed of war. The OIB is our network of maintenance depots.
Mr. Morani, that little black thing near your side, it's a microphone. Yeah, pull it up close and personal. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Our OIB network of maintenance depots, shipyards, fleet readiness centers, air logistics complexes, manufacturing arsenals, and software engineering activities that perform depot-level maintenance. These government-owned and government-operated industrial activities provide core logistics capability to ensure military readiness and serve as a shock absorber when the warfighter's operational surge requirements demand an immediate and flexible response. It is one of our most important strategic assets and has been described as our nation's readiness and war-sustaining insurance policy. Simply put, the OIB must be ready always. At present, the OIB continues to fully support warfighter requirements, but also faces a number of challenges, including the ongoing effects of COVID-19, aging infrastructure and equipment, workforce development and retention, supply chain instability, and the need to balance sustainment requirements of new and legacy systems. The Department is taking action to address these challenges, including ensuring measures are in place to protect our workforce while also meeting production schedules that meet warfighter material readiness requirements, investing $241 million in maintenance technologies through the Commercial Technology for Maintenance Activities program, conducting supply chain risk assessments, and issuing DoD-wide policies for integrating novel capabilities like condition-based maintenance plus, additive manufacturing, robotics, and intermittent fault detection. We are also working to ensure a resilient and responsive organic industrial base and posture it for long-term viability and efficiency. To that end, we have developed a strategy aligned to the requirements cited in Section 359 of NDAA FY 2020. This strategy, which is complemented by the military's services individual investment in infrastructure optimization plans, has four main strategic areas: revitalizing the OIB infrastructure, improving equipment modernization of the OIB, developing and supporting the OIB workforce, and continuous assessment and reporting. Focusing on these areas and continuously improving will provide a future OIB that is safe and properly sized, with modernized facilities and equipment, and supported by a highly competent and innovative workforce. Each area also has metrics-based goals that are specific, realistic, and measurable to determine the success of and compliance with the strategy. The Department will continue to ensure that industrial facilities and infrastructure remain viable capabilities, and that workforce recruitment, development, and retention is a robust and enduring process. These efforts will require predictable and stable funding to succeed, as well as support of the military services force structure plans. And I look forward to working with the subcommittee on these key priorities. Thank you for your support and the opportunity to provide you an update on the steps the Department is taking to revitalize the OIB, as well as your continued support of this vital national strategic asset. I appreciate the critical role and the role this committee plays to ensure the Department is ready to face every challenge. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Costello.
Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Lambourne, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for having us here today so that I and my peers can provide testimony on the U.S. Air Force Depot Infrastructure Optimization. Additionally, thank you for your support of the United States military and our organic industrial base. As the Department of the Air Force continues work to accelerate delivery of capabilities to the warfighter, we must apply the same level of urgency to investment in the organic industrial base and sustainment enterprise to ensure we are ready to deter and defeat potential adversaries. Our current aircraft inventory is becoming significantly more expensive to sustain as it ages. Weapons system sustainment costs have increased 130% over the last 20 years, even with a 15% decrease in total aircraft inventory. At an average age of 29 years, the Air Force fleet is also the oldest in the Department of Defense. Despite this, our exceptional workforce continues to develop innovative ways to sustain legacy weapon systems using emerging technologies and 21st century processes. In fiscal year 2021, the Air Force Sustainment Center Air Logistics Complexes delivered 602 aircraft, 316 engines, 141,353 parts, and 611 software bundles to the warfighter, But even with creative problem solving, our sustainment challenges are exacerbated by the aging infrastructure, a dwindling supply and manufacturing base, and challenges recruiting highly skilled technicians in science, technology, engineering, math workforce to support the mission demands. The U.S. Air Force relies upon a strong organic industrial base to deliver air power in support of the National Defense Strategy. As we shift towards fleets that include fifth generation and beyond capabilities, it is imperative that our air logistics complexes, also known as depots, optimize opportunities to stay ahead of future missions. In 2019, the Air Force developed a 20-year strategic plan to revitalize the depot's infrastructure to accommodate new weapon systems and improve readiness at an affordable cost in the 21st century and beyond. We continue to refine that plan, better articulating projects, defining lines of effort, and implementation strategies. Through our capital investment program and new mission military construction, the Air Force has invested more than $2 billion during the previous 4 fiscal years to maintain and improve infrastructure and equipment across our 3 depots. Our plan details essential dimensions, including depot equipment and technology, digital depot, which includes infrastructure and industrial software, facilities for overhaul and final assembly, and repair manufacturing nodes, and hidden infrastructure, including utilities and the transportation grid. Investments in these dimensions are critical to the Air Force's ability to support weapon systems and retain industrial capabilities, and we're continuing to make investments in modernizing and optimizing these capabilities within current budget constraints, priorities, and realities. The Air Force strives for excellence through technology insertion to improve networking capabilities and to demonstrate our commitment to modernize our organic industrial-based infrastructure. To support a successful modernization, emerging digital technologies such as smart factories, data analytics, robotics, and artificial intelligence are needed to achieve results on par with industry standards and to eliminate waste. Information technology improvements outlined in the Organic Industrial Base Plan are based on the Air Force Digital Campaign objectives, the digital strategy, and the industry best practices, with the objective of building a connected and resilient environment to facilitate maximum effectiveness of people and processes. The Air Force will take maximum advantage of initiatives such as 5G wireless technology, cloud storage, movement from desktop computers to lightweight, faster devices in order to virtualize the work and workforce. People are the Air Force's most valuable resource, and we're making every effort to strengthen and enhance our total workforce. Our ability to meet warfighter needs hinges on attracting, developing, and retaining world-class airmen. Our depots rely on a large labor force of highly skilled technicians and mechanics, and the Air Force Sustainment Center works closely with local vocational training centers and academia, which surround our depots. The use of direct hiring authority and expedited hiring authority for the depots and associated support has allowed us to better compete with industry, to secure top talent, and to reduce hiring timelines. We appreciate your active role in obtaining those critical authorities. The Air Force must accelerate change to prepare for the future and ensure we continue delivering global air power superiority. Stable and predictable budgets are essential to maintain and modernize critical logistics and sustainment capabilities. The dialogue we have today will help us design, build, operate, and sustain a force capable of fighting and winning now and in the future. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify before this committee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Costello. Mr. Stefani.
Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Lambourne, distinguished members of the subcommittee, I'm honored to appear today before you to discuss the Department of Navy's ongoing depot modernization and optimization efforts. A modernized and ready organic industrial base generates our fleet readiness and strengthens our national security. The department appreciates the strong support of this committee as shown in our infrastructure optimization efforts to date, and is committed to maintaining transparency throughout the planning and execution of the department's infrastructure optimization investments. The department has taken an enterprise-wide approach to infrastructure at our depots, our arsenals, our logistics complexes, and our shipyards. The department's efforts are focused on 3 areas: modernizing our aging facilities and equipment, upgrading our facilities to support our future platforms that are coming online in the coming years, and then optimizing workflow and processes to support our current platforms. All this while we continue to do the critical work of maintaining the naval force. Planning for optimization and modernization of our nation's 4 public shipyards is the furthest along. In 2018, the Navy laid out a 3-phase shipyard infrastructure optimization program, SIOP, to modernize and optimize capital equipment, facilities, and dry docks. Since then, we have learned a lot about the complexity, the scale, the interdependencies, and the costs associated with these mega projects. In the near term, we are focused on building, expanding the dry docks, which we need to support our new classes of ships like the Ford-class aircraft carriers, the Columbia-class ballistic missile submarines, and the Virginia-class attack submarines. The Navy has not built a new dry dock in 70 years, so we are working closely with industry to address construction, laydown, and environmental impacts at each location. Facilities optimization will be informed by ongoing digital twin modeling, followed by developing formal area development plans or master plans for each of the 4 shipyards. Above all, we are now treating SIOP like it is a major acquisition program, giving it the visibility and the impact that any other major program would have. And we have dedicated a program executive officer to exercise oversight over this entire effort. Similar planning and investment strategies are underway in support of the Navy's and the Marine Corps' Aviation Fleet Readiness Centers and the Marine Corps' Organic Industrial Base Logistics Installations. These facilities were purpose-built for maintenance, so modernization and optimization planning are taking a different scale than the SIOP efforts. In these areas, we are focused on modeling the workflow and improving processes within existing facilities and in investing in new capabilities, including advanced industrial equipment technology. Both the Fleet Readiness Center and the Marine Corps Logistics Facilities are implementing their plan improvements over multiple phases to provide flexibility for managing facility investment priorities and to ensure these investment facilities and equipment are properly positioned to maintain our legacy platforms as well as our next generation platforms. The department is committed to integrating environmental considerations, including climate resiliency and energy resiliency, throughout our modernization process. From sea level rise mitigation in our naval shipyards to seismic hardening at our West Coast depots, the Navy and Marine Corps infrastructure projects will use sustainable and resilient design principles while optimizing the value of our investments. Thank you once again for the opportunity to appear before your subcommittee today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stefani. Ms. Saunders.
Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Lambourne, and distinguished members of the House Armed Services Committee, Subcommittee on Readiness. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you to discuss depot modernization and optimization. I'm pleased to be here with my counterparts from the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the United States Navy, and the United States Air Force. I also appreciate my written statement being included as part of the record for this hearing. Chairman Garamendi, the Army's vast organic industrial base, along with its patriotic workforce, provide critical material and sustainment support to the joint force in meeting the national defense strategy. This strategic national asset must be protected and modernized to meet future force needs in the multi-domain environment. The Army is currently developing an organic industrial base modernization strategy with investments focused on emerging requirements for facilities and land, energy and water resiliency, equipment modernization, information technology and security, and human capital requirements. This long-term investment plan will be complete in March of 2022 and be a holistic 15-year modernization effort to begin in fiscal year 2024. The Secretary of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Army's priorities are people, readiness, and modernization. We are laser focused on these priorities as the Army continues to develop its organic industrial base modernization investment plan. The Army's #1 priority is people. Our depot and arsenal operations are comprised of more than 32,000 dedicated and highly skilled people who produce, overhaul, and repair newly fielded systems, sustain enduring ones, as well as prototype new ones. This resilient workforce, with its sharp focus on health and safety, continued operations throughout the COVID-19 global pandemic to ensure our joint warfighters had the equipment when they needed it, the equipment that they need when they needed it. As part of the modernization plan, we plan to empower our workforce by employing process automation and other state-of-the-art technology solutions to allow more efficient operations and free workers to focus on technical oversight. This effort will also include a human capital plan to foster partnerships with private corporations, universities, and technical colleges. The plan will not only provide advanced training for our current workforce, but also help us recruit and retain our future workforce. The Army's second priority is readiness, and the health and vitality of the organic industrial base is critical to supporting combatant command requirements and ensuring the success of our joint warfighters. To this end, the Army is simultaneously improving our depots and arsenals to address aging conditions to meet future capabilities. Over the last 5 years, we exceeded our annual minimum investment of 6% to 9% in FY 2020, and 7.4% in FY 2021. These investments include energy projects, infrastructure improvements, and equipment upgrades to support our key modernization efforts. Third, the Army is committed to seeing our signature material modernization efforts through to completion. To meet the requirements of the Army's modernization priorities, we have restoration, modernization, and capital improvement projects programmed as a bridge to the 15-year Organic Industrial Base Modernization Investment Plan. It is difficult to modernize for the future while maintaining current production continuity, but there is greater risk in not doing so. While we continue to prioritize projects that enable readiness, build surge capacity, and modernize for the future, we must also address the fiscal resources needed to reduce single points of failure, protect our industrial control system from cyber threats, and ensure energy resilience. Mr. Chairman, in closing, let me state that we must modernize our organic industrial base with the latest technological advances, manufacturing processes, and safety protocols to ensure our workforce and facilities to operate within the standards of the 21st century. We thank you for your support and the continued support of the distinguished members of this subcommittee in order to achieve the optimized depots and arsenals that our Army and our joint warfighters will rely upon now and into the future. I look forward to your questions.
I want to thank the witnesses for their statements, all of which are appropriate, all of your statements speak to the necessity, and you seem to have some sense of where this committee is going to go, and that is to require that the Department of Defense and the various organizations within it provide not only a plan, but the money. So here's my question to you, and it's really not a question, it is a request that I would ask our committee to enforce, and that is that in the next 3 months, you present to this committee the first 5 years of your multi-year plan, whether it's a 15 or 20-year plan. What are you going to do in the next 5 years? And we would like to have that in detail, beginning with what is the first step in all that you must do in any significant improvement in your facilities, and that is the preliminary engineering and environment. Those reviews. What is going to be necessary for each of your depots and arsenals and shipyards, and then also what the approximate cost of that will be and the timelines associated with it. We intend to be drilling down. Some would say we're going to get into the weeds or the seaweed, as the case might be, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're not going to any longer just deal with your good, appropriate statements, well written, well delivered, but we want to see the result of those statements in detail. So that is an ask of you. I recognize that each of you are acting, and that eventually the President and the Senate willing, you'll be replaced by a confirmed political appointee. I would expect all of you to pass the message on. And since all of you are the senior advisors, or will probably continue to be the senior advisors, advise them that they should be aware of what this committee is going to require of them with regard to the infrastructure, specifically here, the depot infrastructure. I don't expect you to respond today, but I do expect you to be responsive to this. There's one other thing, and that is show us the money. I know that that'll be in the President's budget, but I know that budget will be scrubbed and washed and hung out to dry and significantly shrunk by what is needed. And I would expect, no, we will find a way, given the ISR capabilities of our extraordinary professional staff on both sides, to know what it is you have proposed to each of the departments. We'll find out what is it that you proposed, and then we'll find out what the Secretary has actually approved. And if those two do not match up to the expectations of the 5-year program that you'll develop for us, your replacements as the permanent appointees, they will hear from us. This committee is not messing around. We're going to drive this issue. I also want to alert all the committee members that in the $23.9 billion additional money that was added to this committee, to the full committee's NDAA, there was several $1 billion of projects, base by base, across the entire, well, spectrum of places that we represent. We're going to drill down on that. And we may very well be prioritizing for the purposes of dealing with what I think this committee believes to be the most important infrastructure projects or MILCON projects across the array of 1,100 facilities that we're responsible for. So a heads up to my committee members, we're going to look at this. I would expect your engagement and involvement in that. That'll be part of the ongoing negotiations with the Senate. I could ask a lot of questions. I've asked those questions of you in the previous, with the exception of Ms. Costello, in the conversations we've had. I don't want to take more time. I really want to turn to my colleagues and let them ask their questions. Mr. Lamborn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I, too, would like to see that 5-year plan that you've just asked for. In talks with the Navy representative earlier this week, you said that the PSYOPs are going to be treated like a major program with enhanced visibility. That's a step in the right direction because I'm concerned about these programs not being rated in the future like they have been in the past. And I'd like to ask the Army and the Air Force, how will you protect these modernization programs from being rated in future years?
Ranking Member Lamborn, as the person acting for the ASALT, I can give this subcommittee my commitment to be able to represent the organic industrial base and the importance of it to our modernization efforts as the Army is transforming, bringing in new capabilities. I understand the importance of the entire sustainment infrastructure needs to be transformed as we're developing our new systems. And I will represent that to the Secretary of the Army. to that effect.
Ms. Costello?
Yes, for within the Air Force, we are committed to following these very closely through every step of our budget process. We've formed teams, actually, over this last year who are at every level of our budget process, who are making sure that they emphasize and keep track of our infrastructure investments, our modernization and the sustainment arena. And we're hopeful that that is going to be helpful. I know hope is not a strategy, but I believe having people in the fight every day is important. Often we'd prepare something and then it would be, you'd see what pops out of the machine at the end. So we're trying to stop that and have groups available all the time. At the same time, we'll be championing for those funds along the way, and my office will be in the forefront of that championing because we do see it as very important, working with our Sustainment Center and with AFMC and LCMC.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to now ask you all about the vaccine mandate, and we'll start with you, Ms. Saunders, and just go down the table. You've all noted correctly that the workforce at our organic locations are vital to our national security and would be difficult to recreate. So how will the workforce be impacted by the vaccine mandate? Will those who resist the mandate be fired? And will we have early retirements by those resisting a vaccine with their consequent loss of institutional knowledge? So Ms. Saunders, we'll start with you and just go down the line here.
Thank you. First of all, let me say that the Army's #1 priority is people. And the health and safety of our people is paramount. We do believe the vaccination works, and we believe that an employee that's been vaccinated lowers the risk to him, his coworkers, his family, and to the general public. That is why the Secretary of Defense has issued out policies. To this date, we have not seen any negative reaction within our organic industrial base. We are closely monitoring it, and I can report back to you as we learn reactions to our workforce. Well, we're still working through the policies.
Mr. Stefani?
Yes, sir. As we have basically seen, depending on which of our depots, different levels of the workforce that is not currently vaccinated, especially shipyards but some of the other depots, the workforce works very tightly together in confined spaces, and so having a vaccinated workforce will reduce the risk to each of them as well as their families when they go home and whatnot. So we are certainly encouraging at each location that the implementation of the mandate. As far as your question, as far as retirements and things like that, we have not seen. We have surveyed the workforce and we've gotten indications, but we have not seen any large retirements or movements yet, at least in the workforce at our depots. Sir.
And the Air Force also sees the value in the vaccines and has issued the policy through. It's early to know what the ultimate outcome will be, how many will be vaccinated. We are encouraged. We've seen a lot more people taking their administrative leave while they go get their vaccine, or we assume that's while they're taking it. We expect that we'll be able to work through the perturbations that happen as we did when COVID first hit. Within our organic industrial base, the people who are there are resilient and they are able to find workarounds. And what will happen if we do end up losing some workforce is we'll have to prioritize the work that remains in order to take care of those high priorities. And we're hoping that that will be minimal, but we are ready to take that on as quickly as we can once we know the actual numbers that we're dealing with.
Okay, and Mr. Marani?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. So, again, I don't want to walk the same ground that my colleagues did. We do support the mandate. But with the enterprise that is within my responsibility, DLA, what we're seeing is interesting that it's not necessarily the older workforce, that may have a question about taking the vaccine. It seems to be the younger workforce. They are working through accounting for an attestation of who is vaccinated right now. They actually have built an app that is automated that's allowing their employees to go in and self-attest to the fact that they've been vaccinated. They do expect around roughly 1,000 people to probably ask for an exception, either medical or religious accommodation. Interestingly enough, again, it's probably more weighted on a religious accommodation versus a medical. But we are early in the process. We want to let the process work. No one is going to be fired on the 22nd. There'll be opportunity. Again, I think education is critical in this space, to educate people about the safety of it and the risk of not having it. There'll be escalation in disciplinary actions that will go through a process. So again, I'm confident that we'll work through it. Some may find that when it comes to whether they put their job at risk or take the vaccine, they may decide to take the vaccine. Friends of mine that I know who are in that position, who are working for defense contract companies who have the same kind of mandatory requirement, they all say, if I'm told to take it, I'll take it. So right now, it's a little too early to tell.
Did you repeat that, please?
They said they will get the vaccine. And again, it depends what state as well. Some states, there's more question than others. So right now, I'll just close with saying it's a little too early to tell, but I think we put in places the processes to educate and to understand the concerns, offer those accommodations where appropriate, and then work through any additional attrition that we have to deal with.
I'll just say to all four of you that I'm concerned that if we start having firings and with an organic industrial base that's already limping in some ways, that's not going to make the situation any better. Now, I understand the balancing act. You want to encourage and educate and urge those to get vaccinated who haven't yet been. But there are the religious and medical exceptions, Mr. Morani, that you referred to, and I believe there should also be a previous infection exception also, because those people have natural immunity. So I'm concerned, though, that our economy in general and our organic industrial base in particular is going to be hurt by this mandate, and I'm very concerned about that, and I don't really agree that it's being handled in the correct way. With that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Doug, thank you. I'm going to put into the record a very short statement on this issue. We had a debate that was unending in transportation infrastructure yesterday about this, and I'd rather not have to repeat it, but I want to put this into the record so that it's there. The vaccine mandate has resulted, this is from Secretary Austin, vaccine mandate has resulted in a vaccination rate of 96% among active duty service members. As Secretary Austin has stated, vaccination is one of the surest ways to bolster our readiness. Absenteeism, labor disruptions, quarantine, and paid leave costs from acute illness, mitigation members, and long COVID far outweigh the disruption from a small number of people who might walk off the job. With that, we recognize this is a significant issue in the general public of America, and to the extent that we'll deal with it on the military side, we will. Doug, thank you for raising that. Let me now move on to Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today to talk about this very critical issue. And Mr. Stefani, you've been here a number of times, and this issue of getting the SIOP up and running is something that, again, Navy and Congress worked together starting in 2018 when the planning process came through. There is a 5-year plan, but I was thinking of the Yiddish saying, man plans and God laughs, when the USS Connecticut unfortunately had a serious accident out in the Pacific. And today's hearing is not about that incident. I'm sure, we've already gotten some preliminary information at Sea Power, and we will, at a later date, obviously explore the circumstances of the accident. But right now, it's in Guam. That's public record. There is no dry dock in Guam. Hopefully a sub-tender can do the work, but that remains to be seen. But again, in terms of the Yiddish saying, it just shows how the Navy and all the forces are dynamic forces that the world gets a vote and things change, and unexpected incidents create more demand for repairs. And I didn't know whether you had any comment in terms of just, the attack subs have always been the poor cousin in the public shipyards in terms of getting priority, but we know particularly a Seawolf class submarine is extremely valuable in terms of the mission out in that part of the world. Whether or not there's any sort of comment or statement that you can share with us this morning about the impact that's going to have on the queue.
Yes, sir, Representative Courtney. We will certainly come brief you on everything surrounding the USS Connecticut incident and the plan. And if we end up doing work in one of the public shipyards, that would certainly cause perturbations in all the other work in the shipyards, right? Just like maybe express one of the reasons why the PSYOP plan is gone, and to the chairman's point, we've been talking infrastructure for a while as a Navy and a Marine Corps, but why it's urgent, why the urgency is picked up now and the commitment I think is there now is because we realize these shipyards, particularly, but the other depots are not needed, not optional, but they are necessary to support our forces in our maritime strategy going forward. And we need to optimize them to create that surge ability, where whether it's an accident or wartime damage or whatever, that we have to have that ability to surge. We have some ability to surge by going to the private sector, as you know, sir. But again, those yards are also building new ships, so we need to create this surge ability for the unexpected as part of this. And that's why optimization is just as important to me as the upgrades of the yards.
Well, thank you. And again, that conversations will continue. Again, Mr. Gertz, before he left, had talked a lot about having a 30-year ship repair plan to sort of track the 30-year shipbuilding plan. Where do we stand with that? Is that still something that the Navy is going to follow through with?
Yes, sir. We actually drafted one last year, but as you know, the shipbuilding plan didn't go forward, so the ship repair plan didn't go forward with it. But this year, with this year's President's budget, we'll get a new shipbuilding plan. And then, while not required, we will provide a ship repair plan as well for ships and submarines.
Great. I mean, I think that's a really important, signal for us to be able to have for this subcommittee as well as Sea Power. And one last point on the vaccination. Mr. Garamendi had mentioned the Secretary's statement that framed the vaccination program around readiness. When Admiral Mers laid it out for the Navy, same thing, that this was really a readiness issue for the force. I checked the USNI News latest reporting is that the Navy is at 99% for at least one shot, and I think 96% for two shots. Having been to the public shipyards, I mean, anyone who walks in there sees that the workforce there is working elbow to elbow with active duty Navy personnel. So, I mean, if we're really going to be consistent, everybody should sort of be one team, right? And just sort of working together to reduce the risk of infection, because having that risk there detracts from the Navy's ability to be ready.
Yes, sir. I believe our workforce is one military, civilian, and contractor, all one team, one effort, and we should treat them all the same.
Right. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank each of you for your service to our country. It's really refreshing to see people as positive as you're attempting to be. And Ms. Costello and also Mr. Stefani, this past spring, I visited with Congressman Ralph Norman the McIntyre Joint National Guard Air Base, a leading candidate for upcoming F-35 basing selection. The F-35 is crucial for maintaining air superiority for peace through strength. For both of you, could you discuss your integration with the F-35 Program Office and how your depots are modernizing to support this critical weapon system? Do you have any concerns about being able to service it while maintaining your other priorities?
I guess I'll take that first, sir. So at the moment, I actually have this secondary role to be the service acquisition executive for the Joint Strike Fighter program, in addition to representing the Navy and Marine Corps as users of the Joint Strike Fighter. I would say that from a depot point of view, and Ms. Costello, I'll leave for the Air Force bases and the Air Force facilities that are being upgraded, but the efforts that we are doing for sustainment and creating Joint Force Strike Fighter depots. We're looking at work in Cherry Point, and we're looking at down in Jacksonville for the engines. So we are incorporating that as a new capability into our Navy and Marine Corps depots, and those MOCON efforts are top of the list, and those are getting funded. And I am pretty enthusiastic about our ability to participate as a part of the national effort to take care of these aircraft. And Ms. Costello?
And the Air Force cares an awful lot about our F-35 sustainment capabilities, and at Hill, they're definitely taking on a lot of interest. ACC, our owning command, has prioritized high many of their projects that they need for expanding and scaling the capability. And we're also looking at the Alice to Odin, the software enhancements and the sustainment for that, all of which is going to help with the support and sustainment of that platform going forward.
Thank you. Thank each of you. And Mr. Stefani, you mentioned about sea level rise, and you may not have it with you, but if you could get back with me, I'd be interested on the East Coast, West Coast. For the last 30 years, in increments 1991 to 2001, 2011, 2021, what has been the recorded sea level rise? Also, what, for the next 30 years, the anticipated rise through 2031, 2041, 2051. I would be very interested in seeing what has been recorded and what is to be anticipated. And did you bring that with you?
No, sir, I didn't have that with me.
And so if you could get that to me, I would appreciate it.
Happy to take that as a
Now,
sir.
a question, and good luck who might want to answer this one, but this is for everybody, all right? And the industrial bases face recent budget challenges that impede capital investment is because of sequestration and threaten the viability of suppliers. A recent study indicated by the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates that between 2001 and 15, more than 17,000 companies have stopped being prime vendors for DoD. Which of you would like to discuss the compounding impact of budget sequestration continuing resolutions on depot modernization?
I'll take that first. So again, I think this is a continuous problem when we have a continuing resolution. I think, again, the sequestration that we experienced did drive some backlog, but it's some of the similar problems that we face every year. We don't get the full benefit of the fiscal year to execute to, right? When we're in the continuing resolution, we have we get no new starts, so new contracts can't be let. So that compounds, and then in the remaining fiscal year, the workforce that's available to put on contract to sequence that work. Again, they're compressed schedules. It compresses the work. So again, it throws our planning out of synchronization, doesn't allow us to fully execute in a fiscal year.
And I look forward to working with Chairman Garamendi in a bipartisan manner on how we address this. I yield back.
Mr. Wilson, thank you. I'm going to the current gavel order so that the members can be prepared. Golden, Scott, Luria, Moore. Okay. Mr. Golden.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up a little bit on the issue of vaccinations of the workforce, I'm fairly confident that all of the services and just across the Pentagon, you have workers who are upset about this. It is undoubtedly true. I find it almost impossible to believe that that's not the case at every single depot that you have. So, look, I come out of the military. I had all kinds of vaccines that I had to get. I get it. I was more than comfortable with that. I'm also encouraged by the high vaccination rates that we're seeing in the uniformed part of our military. I'm less comfortable with tying this requirement to being able to show up to work, but that is the current situation. So what I want to convey is these workers were asked from the very beginning of the pandemic. They weren't asked, they were told that they were going to show up to work when there was no vaccine, when we weren't even sure if they should wear protective gear like masks or not. And even if we had known that they should, they weren't really available. People got sick. Some of them died. And they're your workforce, working to provide important things to contribute to our national security and to meet the needs of our service members. For me, this is about respect and how you go about implementing this vaccine requirement, rather than just throwing out a deadline and telling people to meet it or take a hike, which is how I think many of them are perceiving the way this is being implemented. They deserve better than that. They deserve respect and, I think, a collaborative approach. So I think my ask would be that each of the services, and the Pentagon in particular, lead the way, whether it be a public depot or private, federal contractors, and I'm talking about shipbuilding in particular, that you lead the way in coming up with a plan that is negotiated with the workers and their representatives to figure out how to do this the right way, that shows the proper amount of respect to this workforce that we all value so much. They're incredibly skilled. We need them. We can't really afford to lose any of them. Look at the shipyards around the country. We can't really afford to lose even a little bit of them. We're struggling to recruit like crazy. The idea that someone would take administrative leave to get a vaccine is totally unacceptable. No way. Why isn't there a plan to bring the shots to them at the workplace and administer them after having gone through this consultative process of explaining to them why it is in their best interest, figuring out who actually is worthy of an exemption, making sure that when they get the shot, they understand what's going on, what the benefits are, sitting under observation like we all do after getting a shot to make sure that they don't have a negative reaction, making sure that they're cared for and that they feel cared for. I want to know, will the Pentagon commit to working with the services to soften up these deadlines and come up with a way to figure out how to get this done without unnecessarily losing incredibly valuable, skilled workers who contribute a lot to this country and to our national security. And I don't know why that process isn't already fully in place, but the feedback I'm hearing from public and private is that it's not, and where it is, it's haphazard, and there's no consistency whatsoever, and people are very frustrated.
Mr. Golden, apparently that was an appropriate ask of the witnesses and beyond that to the department. Would you like them to respond?
If they have a response. I will certainly be submitting such requests in writing.
Let's have from the Mr. Morani, if you could, from the Secretary's office, respond to Mr. Golden's
Yes, sir. I can provide
question
you
about
a brief response. So that kind of a policy question is personnel related, really not in my area to comment on as far as the policy for that. I can tell you that last week I did get my flu shot and my booster shot, both provided for me on site. As far as trying to understand and share, we're all concerned and we don't want to lose anyone. We tremendously value their patriotism and their work. as I mentioned earlier, through my collaboration with our Defense Logistics Agency and understanding how they are implementing, they are taking every step they can to ensure that everyone is fully informed, everyone is treated with dignity and respect in this matter. But I will take your concern and forward that to my policy comrades.
Yeah, if I'll just jump in for a minute since you mentioned the shipyards. First of all, both the public shipyard and the private shipyard workforce, they are national heroes, right? Before and then last year during COVID, what they did and produced for us, for our warfighters is just incredible. So every one of them, I share with you the respect that we should be providing to each and every one of them as they come through this sometimes difficult, personal decision they have to make. I will tell you, I talked to the shipyard presidents, the 7 major shipyards, just Tuesday this week, and that haphazard implementation that you mentioned, sir, that was their main point, right? We want to do this right by our workforce. We want to do it together with you in the Navy. And so I took action with our Naval Sea Systems Command to get at least a single approach out and let all of our shipyards know this is what we expect them to do on the private side. So that's in process. We want, again, to do the right thing by our workforce, but also recognize the need to protect everybody as well. So hopefully that's helpful, sir.
Very well. The issue of vaccines and vaccination mandates are certainly on the table, and Mr. Golden properly raised the question of that mandate be carried out in a very coordinated, informational, educational, and efficient, effective manner. We would expect that. We'll follow up. Mr. Golden, thank you for raising that. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I too share the concerns about the mandate. I am vaccinated. I have had COVID. I was actually hospitalized with COVID and on oxygen for 14 days. There are legitimate reasons not to take the vaccine. And I'm very concerned about the lack of respect that has been shown for the workforce with regard to this being a personal decision where people do have legitimate objections to it. Some of them religious, some of them health-based. And I would just, again, like to express my same concerns other members have. I do have specific questions for Secretary Morano and Costello, General Hammerstead, who is doing a great job at Robins Air Force Base in the use of robotics. You mentioned this in your testimony. Robins has spearheaded the implementation of the DoD's robotics. And my question is, what is the department's plan to expand that technology into the rest of the organic industrial base, and what do you need from this committee as we push forward with both the NDAA and the appropriation measures for the DoD to do that?
Mr. Scott, thank you for the question. So that is something I can talk about. You're absolutely right. There is some tremendous work going on at Warner Robins. I was just there. That is the most recent depot that I was able to visit, and I can tell you I was part of Air Force Sustainment Center before. 2 years ago, I had visited there, and I can see a marked improvement in what is going on there in the implementation of robotics. So Warner Robins is actually leading the department when it comes to implementation of robotics. They have right now over 40 robotic machines that are, again, taking the place of the human. They're increasing productivity, they're increasing quality, they're increasing health and safety. And then the other benefit is the reduction in environmental impact. So we have worked with Warner Robins. We have worked with the other services. We have a very, very robust working group. We call it JRobot, Joint Robotics Organization, for building organic technologies. We have policy that's in draft right now, first time in the department's history, policy for how we're going to implement and use robotic systems for manufacturing and sustainment. And we have been partnering with the ARM Institute, the Advanced Robotics and Manufacturing Institute in Pittsburgh. So we're working with industry and academia on the same plane to ensure that we're taking advantage of what industry has and incorporating it in our depot. So very proud of what's going on at Robbins.
Secretary Morani, thank you for that answer. If you do have specific recommendations for the National Defense Authorization Act or for the appropriations with regard to robotics and how we implement that as soon as possible, that would be appreciated in short order as we're pushing pretty quick. Secretary Costello, I'm going to move to a second question because I'm down to a minute and a half. And the Catch Up and Leap Ahead initiative, you described this in your testimony. Can you speak a little more to the Catch Up and Leap Ahead and the prioritization that we can expect from the Air Force on that?
Yes, thank you for that question. In addition to the 6%, our catch-up is to invest in using our procurement, our MILCON, our funds that are budgeted either with programs or for the sustainment centers themselves. And then the leap ahead is that future technology, the networks, the technical infrastructure in order to get to that digital depot that we want in the future. So that's kind of what the two are. As far as funding it, that leap ahead is the harder one. That's because we were reliant on our future budgets in order to have a steady stream of funding in there to make that happen. But that's what we're lobbying for. That's part of our plan. And we do start putting things in place now and each year going forward. As we can find additional resources, we do have a fully populated, prioritized list of which things would go first, second, third, fourth. And that is exactly where we'll go as funds are made available either in the same year or as we go into future years. So that's how we plan to address both of those.
Thank you all for being here.
Mr. Scott, thank you for that last question. I'm going to comment very briefly, and then Ms. Luria. Early on, I said we need a 5-year plan so that we can plan, so that we can carry out, as you just said, Ms. Costello, the MILCON piece of it, and also make sure that the other funding available, for example, the robotics, that is also there. So we need the plan and the money associated with it so that we can lay out a 5-year plan. The problem has been created by the military not prioritizing this, and frankly, the Congress not prioritizing. And so I would like us to be able to prioritize, but that requires the integration of these two things. And we will persist. Ms. Luria.
Thank you to our witnesses. I just want to take us back, kind of to maybe a little higher level and also a little bit back in time. When we received the budget this year, the proposal from the Navy had us only building 1 destroyer. It had us decommissioning 7 cruisers, 4 LCS, essentially shrinking the size of the Navy in a time with the rising threats from China. We know we need to be growing the size of the Navy. This committee worked deliberately and in a bipartisan manner to reverse and add things back that were clearly missing from the budget that came over from the Navy. In that vein, the House bill, which has already passed on the floor, it sped us up to 3 Virginia-class submarines a year. It also preserved 3 cruisers and put 3 DDGs in the bill. And lo and behold, it comes to my attention this week that the Navy is letting contracts for decommissioning CMAVs for the cruisers and is already the 3 cruisers that we preserved, specifically the the Monterey, a CMAV to start on 1 November, and also working with an additional contractor to strip the ship of equipment before the CMAV starts. So I was just wondering if you could comment, this is pending law. We need to go to conference, pass it with the Senate, but it's clearly in the intent of this House and of Congress to preserve those 3 cruisers, the San Jacinto, the Lake Champlain, and the Monterey. And can you give some insight into why the Navy is moving forward with the CMAVs in order to start the decommissioning process?
So, yes, ma'am, I recognize the cruisers you mentioned and the process of decommissioning in the initial plan. That again, the committee, we thank the committee for your support in the 21 budget. I don't know why that process was not stopped when we saw the committee action here. I will have to go back to you and find out why our team did not stop the process when they saw that. Ma'am.
Well, thank you. And I've already put this question out to the Navy. I'm still waiting for answers too, so I would greatly appreciate a prompt follow-up because obviously November 1st is next week.
It's coming up
so,
real quick. Yes, ma'am.
we need to understand that.
Yeah.
Another thing, I have concerns about the capacity in our public shipyards. Just looking over the last few years, even before I came into Congress, the Bush had started this DPIA, CVN 77, which lasted 27 months at Norfolk Naval Shipyard. In the Nimitz class design, the first DPIA is supposed to be 10 and a half months. And somehow we got creep from 10 and a half to 27. We talk about needing ships on station to support our efforts in the Pacific and to counter the threat from China. They shouldn't be sitting in Norfolk Naval Shipyard for 27 months. But, a lot of that comes down to a capacity issue. We had to do the MTS conversion. We had another refueling and manpower and those types of things. But now the Ike is going in for a PIA that's 13 months. That PIA essentially should have been a 6-month PIA. The OFRP, I think, pushed it out to 8 months, but now we're adding essentially more than 50% onto the length of that availability. So, what do you need? What do we need to provide as far as resources to the Navy, to stop seeing the length of these availabilities grow? And then, more submarines. There's going to be more maintenance, obviously, in our public shipyards. And above and beyond that, once we get into the SIOP process, and we actually have to take dry docks offline to modernize them, have you taken into account the impact that's going to have a domino effect on the maintenance schedule, because for a period of time you'll have less dry docks available. And there was legislation that we co-sponsored, myself, several of my colleagues, that would have given essentially $4 billion to the private sector industrial base, $2 billion of that for new construction, $2 billion for repair. And I was wondering if you could comment, what are you looking at as far as additional capacity that we need either in public or private nuclear-capable shipyard capacity?
Yes, ma'am. So maybe starting at the back and working forward. We recognize that $4 billion item that was part of the SHIPS Act, and that one. Certainly, the Navy would support that. The larger question of why, in the particular case of that aircraft carrier, Norfolk Naval Shipyard did have a conflict of both work and a workforce. We're not able to get the workforce in they needed, and so we are, while the SIOP projects are coming down to make us more effective and efficient in the future, we are not waiting for that. We've analyzed Stennis, and we're looking at other, particularly at Norfolk Naval, and saying, what can we do better? What we call it the P2P, or plan to perform process. What kind of triggers can we put in and levers can we put in place now to better plan and better have workarounds if we get into trouble on future availability. So I would like to say that the Stennis was maybe an oddball, but we do try to work around and have actually across all 4 shipyards have levers in place to be more efficient and to not get into those cases, particularly for aircraft carriers and ballistic submarines, where the fleet is heel to tail on needing those aircraft carriers and those submarines.
Well, thank you for that response. I would love to follow up, really in more detail and clarity, and look at the maintenance schedules over the next 5 years to understand where those spots are, because I've looked at the operational schedules, and I think that maintenance is clearly driving operations, and that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable in the environment that we have, and we're here today to have a hearing to understand what resources you need in addition to what you have today in order to get the ships out and deployed, in order to be forward. And I have greatest confidence in your commander at Norfolk Naval Shipyard, Diana Wolfson. We served together, and I think she's a perfect person to be leading that effort. But I just want to understand with more clarity the plan. So would love to follow up with you.
Yes, ma'am. That 5-year plan that we did submit, we'll show you the availabilities that are going on at the same time and how that all comes together. That'll be a key discussion with you and your staff.
Ms. Leary, thank you for a very important set of issues. I'm going to read the gavel order. McLean, Moore, Fallon. Ms. Fallon is not on the committee, and therefore I ask unanimous consent that non-committee members be allowed to participate in today's hearing after all committee members have had an opportunity to ask questions Is there objection? There being no objections, then that will be the order. So I want to put one more thing on the table here, and this came from a discussion but has not come up thus far, but I want to get it in the testimony. And this, Mr. Stefani, we were talking clearly all of these updates on the depots are complex. The SIOP is undoubtedly the most complex, and Ms. Lurie and others have raised the issue of the integration of the ongoing maintenance with the upgrade. In our discussion earlier, you talked about a different management mechanism to address this complexity. Could you please speak to that, maybe take 47 seconds to do that? But I do want to get this in the record.
Yes, sir. So in the acquisition world for major acquisition programs, to elevate them, we have a streamlined structure where the assistant secretary to an executive, a flag officer, a program executive officer to provide that executive oversight, one person that's accountable to us and accountable to you, frankly, for making sure the whole program works. And then we have typically an 06 program manager who does the day-to-day business, right? So that structure of an executive at the Pentagon, a single person for execution in the Pentagon, and then an executive to run, make sure it's all running together and bring it all brought together in a strategic mode, and then a program manager to do the day-to-day. And that's the decision process for execution. There's lots of other stakeholders, but they don't get a vote. That's the voting process. Program manager, PEO, and then a service secretary. On the requirements side, again, at the same time on the requirements and resourcing side, a single 3-star in this case has been identified in the Navy to be responsible for the resourcing and the requirements. And that's what we would typically do with a major acquisition program as well. So that structure now we're putting in here. We have a captain identified, he's already in position. We have a 2-star admiral that is coming in. He'll be on board on December 1st to be that executive, that program executive officer, to be the accountable executive for us and for you. And then, of course, myself as the Pentagon lead for the effort. And then, again, we have, like I said, a 3-star admiral on the requirements side to take care of the resourcing and requirements for us.
Thank you, Mr. Stefani. I wanted the committee to be aware of this management change that's underway, and we'll be watching it closely. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you all for being here today. While I agree with my colleagues that the rejuvenation and the modernization of our installations globally is one of the many signals that we can send to our allies and, quite frankly, our adversaries, that the United States is committed to having a modern, powerful fighting force. I fear, though, that we are a little too focused on the long-term peacetime modernization plan and ignoring any potential for the need of a rapid buildup of military assets. I'm concerned with China, who is no friend of the United States, and their ability to leverage their domestic business in a whole-of-nation approach to national defense. So my question is this. In the event of a large-scale combat operation against China, God forbid, is the department capable of surging capabilities, including leveraging private sectors such as the auto industry? I come from Detroit, or the Detroit area, and the auto industry, to compete against China and provide servicemen and women the assets that they are going to require to conduct effective operations against a massive modern military force. Meaning, are we going to be able to adapt on a large-scale basis?
Thank you for that question, ma'am. The Army OIB has both the capacity and the capability to surge, and we have different methodologies to be able to do that. First of all, we have a strategic resourcing contract that we can leverage to surge personnel to where we can go to 24-hour operations. We can also implement authorities such as direct order, direct exchange, which prioritize parts. And then we can also work with the executive branch to implement Defense Production Act, which goes out to industry and ensures that they prioritize our requirements.
I'm glad to hear that. So in essence, what I heard was yes.
Yes,
We
yes, ma'am.
are prepared that, God forbid, there was a large-scale attack, we could, in essence, turn relatively quickly and be able to, we have the resources, we have the ability to turn our manufacturing facilities and adapt those to what you all need to prepare.
Yes, ma'am, both in human capital as well as material.
What kind of time frame would it take, does the department need in order to get that done?
Ma'am, if I may, so I think COVID-19 and our national response was a great example, case study in how we can leverage the capacity of our industry and move fast and use mechanisms like Ms. Saunders mentions, DPA Title I and Title III, to energize private sector that has similar capabilities. So I do think that model and what we're studying and looking at that shows how quickly we could react. I was on the Joint Acquisition Task Force for 6 months supporting Health and Human Services, so I learned a lot through that process. So I would agree that we can move pretty quick if we have targeted investment in those areas where we need that capacity. Ventilator manufacturer was one, and we did leverage the auto industry. So we have demonstrated that we can do that, and I'm confident that when called upon, industry and government will work together to react in the time frame necessary and leverage the capacity of both.
And I agree with you on a very, if the pandemic, if there was a silver lining in terms of that, it exposed what we were good at and exposed some of our flaws in that. And there were manufacturing companies in my district that were able to convert rather quickly to accommodate our needs. So again, I hear from you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, sir, is in a relatively short period of time, we can make that conversion very rapidly.
Relatively speaking, depending on what it is we're trying to surge to, we can make those target investments and act. I mean, I will use ventilators as an example.
And let me, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm almost out of time. Is there anything that we can do to help expedite that process?
Mm-hmm. So I think the authorities are there. We are looking at DPA Title III and how we can actually leverage that for the organic base. So if we need additional help, we will come to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. McLean, you're on to a set of issues that the full committee and several members of the committee are dealing with, and that is to get ahead of the critical elements in the supply chain and the use of the department's authorities. If you'd like to stay with that, there are several other members of the full committee and on this committee that are working on that. Okay. Mr. Moore, you've gone and you're back, and you've gone and you're back, and it's your turn.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to keep you guessing.
And that may have to do with that emergency evacuation sign behind your head.
All is well. Fire extinguisher. Thank you all.
Speak into the microphone so we could hear you. Thank you.
As co-chair of the House Depot Caucus with the Ogden Air Logistics Complex, these are utmost important priorities to, one of the key things, one of the key reasons that I want to serve on this committee. So it's of utmost priority. These proposed depot investments, described as once-in-generation projects, are long overdue, and these need to be brought into the 21st century. So I share many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle some concerns and frustrations about where we're at with a lot of these plans. This would be a question for all the witnesses. Since 2007, Congress has required the DoD to invest 6% of depot workload revenue back into the depots. In 2019 report, the GAO indicated that the services almost always met their 6% minimum, and yet facility conditions have worsened and modernization backlogs have increased. So going in the wrong direction. We're now looking at tens of billions of dollars to fix the depots across DoD. Is 6% too low an investment floor to keep the depots sustained?
I'll go ahead and start on that one. From the airport's perspective, we believe that 6% minimum is appropriate as a minimum. We have been investing more, at least that, if not more, every year for the recent years, and we plan to continue to do that. So the concern with making a minimum higher is that could have some unintended consequences depending on the color of funding and what you're doing. If it comes out of our working capital fund, it affects rates, which then translates to readiness, other challenges. So we balance. But as a minimum, 6% is fine as a minimum. We plan to be investing more than that. Thank you.
I would say from the Navy and the Marine Corps, same view is we have to catch up. We are way behind. And so we will be putting more than 6% in for our fleet readiness centers and the SIOP program. Once we get caught back up, I think to Ms. Costello's point, a minimum of 6%, and then the balance of that between equipment and actual facilities needs to be something we look at a little harder.
From an Army perspective, I agree with both my Air Force and Navy colleagues. 6% minimum. As you know, the 6% is calculated as a function of both revenue and workload, and the way the calculation's made with depreciation. We really feel that 6% as a minimum is appropriate at this time.
Yes, sir. I'll just add.
Oh, please.
Finally, I agree as a threshold, it's a satisfactory floor. The services are all investing above that. We do have to be careful about what that does to the rates. But I will add that alone, it's not enough. We need to ensure that as we bring on new weapon systems as part of the acquisition strategy, any new system ought to have new mission MILCON associated with it. That is where we can catch up, and we can build facilities that are agile, that will allow us to combine functions, that will allow us to use those facilities into the future for other things than maybe originally designed, and to ensure that they're built with construction methods that allow for energy efficiency and help us optimize in those areas environmentally as well. Over.
I just reiterate the chairman's request to have some detail on this, and we look forward to it. And my team is always at the ready to dig into any of these as well, given our role and the importance of the depots to not only my district but many others. I'll ask one more question briefly, Ms. Costello. We have a retirement problem in the AFSC. Federal wage grade employees will be eligible to retire by 2080. Over half will be. To replace it's going to be very difficult. Is there anything that we can be focused on as a committee to make sure that we're able to optimize and sustain that workforce, that there's going to be a dearth of it soon?
So I recognize that challenge, as in our entire workforce ages in this area. We are investing quite a bit in efforts to retain and recruit people for our organic industrial base and our depots specifically. We have the hiring authorities which help us get them on. We're looking to modernize our depots, which we believe will attract. We're partnering with academia, which is a great tool for recruiting because people see what we're doing. Our biggest draw, as we said earlier, is our mission. Our mission is really what brings people in, and that's what's keeping some of those people from actually retiring, is that they believe in the mission and how important it is. And we're doing everything we can to make the conditions under which they work something that's sustainable while we're recruiting additional people.
Yield back the time I don't have.
That's okay. We're being a little Mr. Fallon, it's your turn.
Oh, great. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I couldn't hear you. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, I like to submit my remarks for the record. And first off, I want to thank you for inviting me today, allowing me to speak and ask a few questions. Depot readiness and modernization is a topic that's of great importance to me, not only to me, but to Texas and the country. Our district is home to Red River Army Depot, which is the Army's Center for Industrial and Technical Excellence for tactical wheeled vehicles. Depots improve readiness and save the federal government billions of dollars every year. Specifically, Red River has created a unique capability of flyaway teams to address the urgent matter of Humvee rollovers. The Army has invested considerable resources in the depot to have a core capability to install the ABS and ESC rollover kits, and they have special tools and equipment to do so. The Army projects it'll maintain about 50,000 Humvees in service until 2050 that did not have the rollover mitigation or ABS capability addressed in the new production. With so many of these legacy vehicles being new or like new, they're used by our soldiers every day and located across the United States. We've lost too many soldiers to these rollover accidents. However, the rollover mitigation technology that is on them, once it's in place, it works just as well as like a new vehicle that are coming offline on 2019 and in 2020. And readiness is clearly an issue for the base commanders in terms of how to address the safety issue, whether they're new or they're like new and used vehicles. So I think the solution for good policy is the flyaway teams. A brand new Humvee costs $400,000. A retrofitted Humvee costs $15,000. And if we could, I know we can't retrofit them all because some of them are just so old that it's just time to buy new ones, but we can retrofit most of them. And we can save literally billions of dollars. The high estimate is about 12.9 billion. I think we must do it. We're in a time where we're in some budget crunches, particularly vis-a-vis defense. So this is my concern is there wasn't a lot of money allocated for this in the budget. And we have teams that are in place that are highly skilled, but if they're not doing the work, we're going to lose those teams. So what I wanted to do is if I could have a question for Secretary Saunders, and it's a compound question, but how much of a priority is it for the Army and across the military to do what I just described? And if it's a major priority, is it? I believe it should be. Then why wasn't it fully funded? And then lastly, in your view, did the Army emphasize the importance of this program to the appropriators? Did they emphasize it appropriately? I'd really appreciate to hear your response. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Fallion. I appreciate your question. First of all, I want you to know that the Army views as our number one priority as people that the life and safety of our soldiers is paramount. And so ensuring that they are equipped, that they have equipment that is safe is a priority. The Army does intend to equip all of our Humvees that are in the fleet with the increased safety capability as soon as fiscally possible. But as you know, the Army is also modernizing. And so this is a balance. And so in our light tactical vehicle fleet, we're looking at bringing in the JLTV. We're looking at bringing on Humvees off the production line that already have safety equipment, as well as retrofitting. So it's a balance across the entire wheeled vehicle fleet. In 22, we do have $10 million set aside for retrofit kits, but we are also sharing the resources with JLTV as well as Humvees coming off the line already with the advanced safety capability. And then I do want to remind you in FY21 we were given an additional $4.5 million to send out 2 teams to Fort Bragg and Fort Lewis to retrofit teams, so to retrofit vehicles. So this is important to us. But we're looking, while keeping safety paramount, we're also looking at how we're modernizing while maintaining our enduring force.
Right, and Secretary, sorry to cut you off, but with all due respect, we only funded about 1% of the vehicles for retrofit. And as you just mentioned, JLTV is going to come online, I believe, in 2050. So buying new Humvees that we know are going to be replaced. I think that it was not quite the balance that it should have been, and I would really like to see, and will advocate for, the retrofitting whenever possible. And the 10 million was a pittance, considering it should be probably closer to 200 million. But thank you so much for your question, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Mr. Lamborn. We're about to wrap up here. I don't see any of other members. Mr. Bergman, did you want to ask a question?
No, sir. I would make one comment to echo what you have said multiple times. If you have a 25-year plan, you don't have a plan, speed it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. A couple of things Mr. Fallon raised, and as did Ms. Luria, one of the conundrums that all of us face. We have a legacy fleet across all of the departments, and we need to move on to tomorrow's platforms. And the conundrum is, how do we maintain the legacy fleet as it phases out and the new platforms phase in? That conundrum requires additional resources at the depots so that the transition can take place without loss of the legacy fleet's readiness. We have seen multiple examples of where this problem has led to tragedies. I'm thinking of the AAV, the amphibious vessels that were not maintained but used off the coast, various rollovers, airplanes that whose blades fall off, like the C-130s, and also radars that don't work well, and ships run into each other in the Western Pacific. It is the business of this committee to work with the department and the departments and the Secretary to address this ongoing issue, which will be with us forevermore. And so there are two things that seem to me to be fundamental. First of all, that the military, well, just yesterday, a couple of generals said, if there's anything we do, we plan. Okay, I want to see the plans for this. And that's the 5-year question versus the 20 years. We understand that this is going to go beyond 5 years. And so, but be very, very specific about the first 5 years. And we will be watching that very carefully. We'll also be looking at how to address the conundrum of phasing in and phasing out, which I suspect is a question of the facility itself, that if we're going to build a new facility, it'd be built in such a way that it can be flexible. And well, I don't think there's anybody on this committee that is an industrial architect. I know that every person on this committee will think that they are when you look at your plans. And then we'll hire somebody to look at your plans. That is an industrial architect and planner. So be aware that we're going to drive this issue. I know that all of you are acting. We understand that. I also know that you're all senior executives, and as near as I can tell, none of you intend to retire. But the heat's going to be on you so that you can put the heat on the new appointees whenever they may arrive, and until they do, you are the direct recipient of both the sources of concern. I think we've covered most of the ground here. With that, Doug, I'm going to adjourn the committee and look forward to the future. Committee's adjourned.
Thanks, John.